See, it's, I mean, I remember the first day I met JJ, and then, here he is. This is so awesome. We just love JJ, right? And actually, we've all gotten to know him so well. It's just been so cool to really get to know JJ, who's undoubtedly going to be an awesome math teacher, and teacher of many other things as well. So his research focusing on math teachers' understandings of their students' cultures affecting their pedagogies. JJ?
Okay, let's dive into it because we don't have much time. Okay, the title of my master's research presentation is How Do Math Teachers and Their Understandings of Their Students' Cultures Affect Their Pedagogies. Here's the overview, where we're going and how we're going to get there. First, we got to look at some observations that motivated my study, which led to a research concern. Then we're going to talk briefly about methods, the themes discovered, and some quotes that kind of formulated those themes, conclusions, and the significant amount of work I still need to do, and limitations and concerns. Okay, so let's provide context. So 2 participants in the study were my co-teachers, and they teach at a local high school here, and one of them is a regular 9th grade algebra teacher. The other one, who literally taught across the hall, is a honors algebra teacher. And needless to say, their styles and their pedagogies, they're quite different. So you can imagine me being pulled apart as I go from 2nd period, walk across the whole of 3rd period, and all of a sudden it's just like a completely different world. But let's look at some observations that I noticed. In the regular algebra classroom, this teacher, the department said, and I quote, this teacher is a role player that is effective at supporting those marginalized students. His learning, the learning that occurs in the classroom, and occurs through repetition, practice, and direct instruction. Whereas across the hall, the honors algebra teacher, well, that teacher style of teaching is more investigation-based. He focuses a lot on teaching those students the skills necessary for collaborative work, and it seemed like the students have a lot of fun in there. All the problems are very relevant. There's a lot of project-based learning going on. So those are observations within the context of the teachers and how they teach. Here are some observations that I noticed about the students and how they responded to those pedagogies. And again, 2 tells of the tape. The 9th grade regular algebra teacher, the students just didn't seem to be as engaged for the most part. Some of them were. They struggled, a significant number of students struggled with complex problems, meaning if they were given a problem that has like 3 or more steps, they're quick to give up. And then across the hall, in the honors algebra classroom, well, these students were excited about the mathematics. Several of them said that this class is their favorite class, which it was, to be honest, and there is some bias in this study, it was my favorite class too. Okay. And these students had, most of them had problem-solving skills. Not to say that they crushed every complex problem that they ran across, because they certainly did not. They got crushed mostly. But the thing is they understood how to go from being stuck on a problem to being unstuck. Some really crucial problem-solving skills that they had in this honors classroom that they did not in the regular algebra classroom. And I don't have specific data, but the demographics of the honors classroom versus the regular algebra classroom were quite different as well. Whereas you mostly had students of color in the regular algebra classroom, and actually it's not a regular algebra classroom, it's more of a 2-year tracked type of remedial algebra classroom, and whereas in the honors classroom that was not the case, it was mostly white students. So those observations, as well as the influence that culturally responsive pedagogy has had on me in my 3-4 years of formal education here, those 2 factors combined led me to my research concern, which essentially is the title of my presentation. So how do these math teachers and their understandings of their students' cultures, how does that influence the way they teach? That led me to my research concern. Because ultimately integrating the students' lives into our content is like the most challenging, but also the most beneficial task that any good math teacher or science teacher should take on. So let's go to the methods quickly. I use a qualitative grounded theory approach. Basically just means that I extended theory. In this case, I'm extending the CRP theory from the qualitative analysis. And that qualitative analysis comes from the interview data. So the interview data comes from 5 current informed math teachers, all of which have substantial experience teaching marginalized youth. And so why interview 3 extra math teachers? Because I needed more data. That's why. And that's not a very sophisticated response, and that is something to consider. And then I coded the data using in vivo with a constructivist bias, meaning that these themes were going to emerge, and these themes were going to emerge from the data. Okay. Interview questions. I'm not going to go into great detail. Can you guys see those? You can't? Come closer. I'm not going to go into great detail about the interview questions themselves. However, one thing that was interesting was that when I asked these interview questions, the answers varied wildly, which led me to believe that these were decently formed interview questions and that they had some open-ended answers. Okay, and from these interview questions, I got some data, coded the data, and then coded it some more, sifted through the codes and the nodes, and really summarized and generalized and developed 3 themes. And these were the emerged themes that I came up with. See, there's color. Right there. Okay, culture affects learning. This is how the teacher believes that culture affects learning. The teacher's pedagogical philosophies, and how the teacher's perceptions of the student's abilities and beliefs. So my next step during this qualitative grounded theory, qualitative data process or analysis process would be to form some relationships from the themes. But before we do that, let's look at some defining and significant quotes from each theme. Okay, let's do that. So here are some quotes from the theme Culture Affects Learning. And I'll give you guys a couple seconds to look at them and a couple seconds to get my breath. Okay, so several of the quotes that I collected during my data collection process suggest very similar things that these quotes suggest, but so the first and the third I think are really important in that they suggest that the participants viewed culture through a deficit lens. And when I say deficit lens, meaning that the participants saw their students as limited by their culture. And that deficit lens ideology just kind of was extracted out of the quotes. And that was really a major sub-theme from this theme, culture affects learning. And another significant quote, I think this is probably, has to be one of the better quotes. Wow. Okay. The second one's important in that it suggests that when the culture gap between a student and a teacher is narrowed, meaning that their cultures are very similar, that the student will have success. And that quote in itself can be a research paper. And here are a few important quotes from pedagogical philosophies. And just looking at the first quote, it seems that So during the process, I was trying to understand the philosophies of the teachers when I was reading these quotes. So I'm extracting these philosophies and the underlying meanings. And the first quote, it seems that at the expense of a student's socio-emotional needs, their learning is being compromised. Even though here it says, well, we just have to make sure that these disadvantaged students need a safe and comfortable place. Well, they do need that. They do need that, and study shows that these students need a consistent environment in which they know that they're coming into a safe and comfortable classroom. However, when we leave at the wayside like mathematical rigor, we're not exactly setting them up for success. And that's what I kind of extracted from that one, from that quote itself. And then 3 significant quotes from students' abilities and beliefs. I just want to bring you guys' attention to the third quote in particular. We are not going to call upon a poor, struggling student, let's call her Mary. We're going to call on the strong student, Terry, instead. That to me sends a message that well, it's not okay to have wrong answers in class. Because this student, the struggling student, I know would give us a wrong answer, but that's okay. But the message that that's sending is that it's not okay to be wrong in the classroom. But that's a bit of backwards thinking, I believe. So there are some significant quotes, and here are the relationships that I kind of teased out from the themes and the quotes. That is that there's a relationship of deficit perception of culture that affects lower expectations and low student self-efficacy. And if we just start with lowered expectations, if the classroom has lowered expectations, well, that's, to me, that sends the message that students and their cultures that they are attached to and affected by, that it sends the message that they are not able to rise up to the challenge of rigorous mathematics. And I think lowered expectations are probably a product of deficit perception of culture. And that also affects student self-efficacy. But what is needed is literature. And that's where I'm at right now in this stage of my research. So really, I'm kind of considering this an advisor/advisee meeting to perhaps point me in the right direction and provide feedback to help me continue this qualitative research process. What else is missing from the data? The students' voices. To me, that was a limiting. Given the time constraints, it was difficult because I had a later start on the research to get that data collected. My voice and teaching experiences are missing because those 2 classrooms I taught them, they were mine for 1.5, 2 months. And then I need some artifacts, I think. Student assignments would be a good example, like a rigorous assignment in the honors classroom versus a not so rigorous assignment in the regular algebra classroom. The co-teachers are the subjects, and I spent a lot of time with them, have developed relationships with them, so I think biases definitely exist. And then again, maybe really talking about why I interviewed the other participants and talking about the interview questions themselves. So there's a lot of glaring things that need to be addressed within this research, but like I said, it is there's still a lot of work to be done. So, that being said, questions or comments? Yes.
Can you answer your last question? Why did you compare 2 classrooms but interview 5 teachers?
So the 2 classrooms is more of that kind of motivated the concern. At first, the research was going to be 5 phenomenological studies of 5 teachers, where those 2 classrooms kind of, it's almost as if I have 2 research projects going on at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I feel like you have competing pathways.
Yeah. And what's also interesting is that there are students that transferred from the regular honors, the regular algebra classroom into the honors classroom, that there are a handful of them, 8 or 9 or so, that some of them struggle mightily, and some of them do really, really well. And that itself is its own research question. Or it could contribute to the research that I'm doing here. So it's, if that answers your question. Yeah.
JJ, how do you see your findings influencing your pedagogical practices?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question.
Thanks.
Knowing, yeah. So when I was in the regular algebra classroom, I saw this mentor that I took from him like really great strategies for developing relationships with students, being like, i.e. perseverance was a really necessary skill. However, at the same time, I noticed that there was also lacking this rigorous engagement with mathematics itself. So for me as a teacher, I need to be able to take both of those elements of pedagogy and just like smash them together. And I think that these disadvantaged students, like I understand that you really got to get them, you really have to support them in so many different ways. Because we have students that are refugees, students that don't know if they're going to be deported the next day. So many different problems that need to be addressed. However, if you just support them without raising the expectations, then I feel like we're doing nothing for them. And that's what I don't want to do. Yeah.
What were the ethnicities of the 5 teachers?
There was 3. I think they were all white. Yeah.
Right now, or?
Well, four white dudes and 4 white men and a white woman.